Lilui Nishmat or Nishmot. Daniel ben David and Limud bat Abraham Strauss and Mordechai Moshe and Razel bat Yosef Meir Marcus, Zichronam Livracha, parents of Judy and Menachem Marcus. And our shir, as usual, is in memory of Elisheva Frist, Elisheva Sima bat Zalman, Zichronam Livracha. Mishenichnas Adar Marbim Bisimcha. Now, people think that's a Mishnah somewhere in Masechet Megillah. Well, guess what? It's not there. The Mishnah is in Masechet Ta'anit, Mishenichnas Av Mima'atim B'Simcha. When Av comes in, we reduce Simcha. And the Gemara says, Kishem Shenichnas Av Mima'atim B'Simcha, Kach Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. As when the month of Av enters, we reduce Simcha, so too when we enter the month of Adar, we increase Simcha. Which is interesting that Chazal didn't just say, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, but they said it in the context of the Avelut of Churban Abayit. So they're trying to tell us something. They're trying to say, just as we reduce Simcha because of Churban Abayit, we increase Simcha in the month of Adar. One can basically think in so many different directions of what the Chazal may have had in mind. There's what to be said about the correlation of Avelut and Simcha, that some of these are the extremes of human emotions and human experiences, and somehow they have the same source. The source is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who allows us Simcha, and unfortunately sometimes has us mourn for various occasions. When the Rambam talks about the laws of Evel, he says that Moshe Rabbeinu established Shivat Yemei Avelut v'Shivat Yemei Mishteh. In one breath, Moshe Rabbeinu made an enactment that we should mourn for 7 days after the immediate relatives, and that we should have Sheva Brachot, 7 days of Mishteh after a wedding. I mean, the Rambam had ample opportunity, and he does talk about the idea of Simcha, of Shivat Yemei Mishteh, in the laws of Ishut, in the laws of marriage. But here in the laws of Evel, he puts together the enactment, the takana, of 7 days of Shiva and 7 days of Mishteh, which obviously is trying to teach us something of the interrelationship between Simcha and Evel, that Jews always, during Avelut, remind themselves that there's going to be nechama, there's going to be consolation, and Jews in the midst of Simcha always remind ourselves to tone down the Simcha, because there was a destruction of Beit HaMikdash. As we do under the chuppah, we remind ourselves all the time. So this is somewhat constant. So when you talk about Mishenichnas Av Mima'atim B'Simcha, Chazal say, but don't forget Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. And maybe it's also teaching us something, that Purim has something to do with the ending of the mourning period of Av. Something to do with it. And what might that be? The fact that Beit HaMikdash, the second Beit HaMikdash, was built but was also destroyed. So you might think that there's something very, very much tampered down. The Simcha, the joy of the second Beit HaMikdash is watered down. It's somehow reduced. That the Simcha is not really complete, and so on. So the truth is, the Rav once said that, in the Ala Nisim that we say both for Chanukah and Purim, so everything is in Hebrew, Ala Nisim, except for one word, Purkan. It says Ala Nisim v'ala Purkan v'ala Gvuot v'ala Tshuot v'ala Nechamot Shasita Lavotenu v'yemim mahem b'zman hazeh. Everything is in Hebrew. All the miracles and great things that were done. But what does the word Purkan mean? Why does an Aramaic word get thrown into this whole thing? Now we know the word Purkan. We say it on Shabbat in the Aramaic section, Yekum Purkan min Shemaya. So how would we translate Yekum Purkan? A type of Yeshua, a type of, which is Chuot in Hebrew. So what are we adding in the Al-Hanisim by saying it in an Aramaic? And the Rav said there's one word conspicuously absent from the Aramaic, from the Al-Hanisim, and that's the word Geula, redemption. It's not there. So what Chazal did was they plugged in an Aramaic equivalent of a reduced nature, Purkan, to teach us that Geula is not appropriate for neither Hanukkah nor Purim. Geula is appropriate for two occasions, Pesach and the final Geula, the Geula Atidah. Then we are permitted to use the word Geula. B'Nisan nigalu u'b'Nisan atidim lehigael. In Nisan we were redeemed, and Nisan we will be redeemed. And there's another version, B'Nisan nigalu u'b'Tishrei atidin lehigael. But obviously the first Gaal is Nisan, Pesach, and the second one is the Yemot HaMashiach, Geula Atidah. But Hanukkah and Purim, they were Yeshuot. They were, Kadosh Baruch Hu bailed us out. They bailed us out, but they're not to be considered full-blown Yeshua, Geulot. So, what was that? Let me finish. So the Rav said this in a Shir, said that, in those days I wasn't all that smart. I'm not that smart today either. And I have a question, but unfortunately the Rav's not here for me to ask him that question. And that is that Chazal did use the word Geula with regard to Purim on two occasions. Once, where it says Mismach Geula leGeula. The Gemara wants to know if there's a Adar Sheni, a leap year. So which Purim, remember the show To Tell the Truth? Will the real so and so please stand up? Will the real Adar please stand up? And that's a big machloket. But even according to those who think that the real Adar is the first Adar and the second Adar is the add-on, everybody makes Purim and Adar Sheni. That's clear. Adar Sheni is the Adar of Purim. And the Gemara says, Mismach Geula leGeula, to keep a connection, a symmetry between the first episode of Geula and the second episode of Geula. So the first is actually Pesach, but the second would be Purim. But you see the Chazal call Purim a moment of Geula. And the second question would be from the end of Pirkei Avot, the 6th parak, where you have the 48 ways of Torah acquisition, Arba'im Shmona Drachim of Kinyan Torah, and the last one is Omer Davar B'Shem Omro, quoting somebody else, not taking credit for a great idea. And it says, V'chol Omer Davar B'Shem Omro, Mevi Geula Le'olam, Shene'emar Vatomer Esther Lamelech B'Shem Mordechai. There's a quote from Megillat Esther that shows that it's proper to quote somebody and not to take credit for yourself. And you see the Mishnah calls Purim Geula, Homer Davar B'Shem Omro, Mevi Geula Le'olam. So the Rav is not here to answer that question, but nevertheless, something the Rav did say provides an answer. And that's a thought from the Rav's grandfather, Rav Chaim from Brisk, that says as follows, that actually, Bayit Sheni, there are two different functions of Bayit Sheni. One is it was historically the second Beit HaMikdash that had a beginning and had an end, and Chazal teach us why it had an end. You don't have to wait till the bitter end of Kamsa Bar Kamsa and the likes to say why Beit HaMikdash was brought down. That only teaches us that it was brought down at that moment because of Sinat Chinam. But Chazal teach us that second Beit HaMikdash actually never had a chance because OUisrael in Bavel never came on Aliyah. Only 5% came. 95% stayed in America. They called it Bavel. That was the nickname. They called it Bavel. Rabbi Yehuda Levi says they had their homes, they had their businesses, they had their fields, and they were settled. This was just 2 generations after the Churban, the destruction of first Beit HaMikdash, and they were refugees in Bavel. But now the second generation, they already went to college, and they went to this, they opened up stores, and so on. They were settled. Sound familiar? They were settled. And therefore, they didn't want to pack the bags again and be, newcomers in a new land and start out from scratch and so on. And Chazal said that that's why the second Beit HaMikdash never had a chance. Okay, so that was in terms of the historic, the second Beit HaMikdash. But the Rav explained the name of his grandfather that actually there were 2 Batei Mikdash, the first and the second hyphenated third. That the second Beit HaMikdash, albeit was destroyed, but it's actually on pause. It's on pause, when sometimes you're watching something on computer and also you get a phone call or whatever, something else is calling, you push the pause button and you come back to it 10 minutes later, and so thank you very much. You come back to it 10 minutes later and you resume. They said that Beit Mikdash is on pause and it's going to resume at the moment that we activate Beit HaMikdash, and it's going to be the third Beit HaMikdash, is actually the continuation of the second. And where did Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik from Brisk come up with this grandiose idea? From the Haftarah from Shabbos Chanukah, and it's also Parshat Ba'alotcha, from the Sefer Zechariah, the story of the Neirot Zechariah. The Navi Zechariah sees the menorah Kula Zahav Gula Rosha, this great menorah that's gold and everything, and he looks around and he says his menorah was made out of wood. The Beit HaMikdash in Bayit Sheni was built on an austerity budget, and they did not have a golden menorah. And Zechariah says, Ma'ela Adoni. He speaks to the divine spokesman, the Malach HaDoverbi. Ma'ela Adoni. What exactly am I seeing? And the Malach says, what's the matter? You can't see? And he says, Ma'ela, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And the answer was, Lo b'chayil b'lo b'koach ki im beruchi amar Hashem tzvaot. What does that mean? What's the answer? He says, this menorah kula zahav that you're seeing is not your menorah. It's the extension of your Beit HaMikdash. It's the third Beit HaMikdash, when there'll be no power, lo b'chayil, lo b'koach. Nobody's going to be interested in power, but rather just the spirit of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's going to be the third Beit HaMikdash, Yemot HaMashiach. And Rabbi Chaim said, the answer tells us that what Zechariah was seeing at the beginning of Bayit Sheni was part one of what ultimately would become also part two of one Beit HaMikdash that would be on pause for 1900 years. And therefore, in that respect, the Rabbi always explained that Purim led ultimately to Bayit Sheni, and leading to Bayit Sheni means ipso facto that it's leading to Bayit Shlishi. And if it's leading to Bayit Shlishi, it's appropriate to use the word Gula on some aspects of Purim. All right? So that's the answer I would have given the Rav had he given me permission to answer, which is, by the way, what went on in the car when I had these grandiose questions. And I said, I asked the Rav permission, can I answer it? And he was so courteous, because if he wouldn't be, I'd let him off in the middle of the Triborough Bridge, So he let me answer, and then, either I got, and then he polished up what I said. Yeah, Vaksha.
Right. Regarding the Rav's second question of Kol HaOmer Davar B'Shem Omro.
Right. The Rav. You mean my question, not the Rav. Yeah, I'm not the Rav. The Rav is the Rav. Let's not confuse. Oh, give me a break. I'm not on Rosh Hashiva, Litvish Rosh Hashiva.
I'm in choke when I say you are, but okay.
You can say I'm second person. Yeah.
That's right. So you basically came to the end, but what I thought of was that anyone who says something in somebody else's name brings the ultimate Gugulam.
Absolutely. That's the Vort. That's for sure the Vort. But the idea is that Chazal derived it from Megillat Esther. So where's the Rai? Where's the proof? The answer is that also led to the ultimate Gula. That's the point. That there's an aspect of Purim that leads to the ultimate Gula. And now we can understand why Chazal said, Kishem shemishinechnas av mimatim b'simcha kach mishinechnas adar marbim b'simcha. That it's linked. It's linked. The Churban Abayit and the sadness, the mourning, spills over into the joy of returning to Eretz Yisrael, rebuilding Beit HaMikdash, and so on. So that's why Chazal most probably put it together. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Purkan is Yeshua,
right.
Not Gula.
Right.
So why couldn't they use Yeshua?
It says Chuot, it says it. But here the Rav believed that it was a deliberate attempt to draw your attention that there's a word there that's missing. That should have been there. If you're talking about the Niflaot and Chuot and Milchamot, Shasita Lavotenu, the word Gula, is missing. So where is it? I mean, it's something that should have come to mind. And they left it out, and they left it out deliberately. So just that there was a suggestion that in order to draw your attention that something's missing here, so it was it was put in Aramaic an equivalent that's not even Gula, it means something else, but just to draw our attention to this fact. It was an interesting idea for sure, no doubt. Okay, so today's Rosh Chodesh, and actually many weeks ago I thought that maybe on Rosh Chodesh we would do Borchi Nafshi, which is the, right? So one of the nice things about Rosh Chodesh, that if you miss it one month, you get it the next month. So B'li Neder on March 18th, which will be Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan, I'll try to remember to prepare Shir on Borchi Nafshi, okay, Tilim Kuf Daled, but that's a Shir that I think might take more than 1 week because it's a little bit long, but nevertheless. Okay, so we're going to do Yom Shlishi, Yom Shlishi b'Shabbat, which is Tilim Perek Pei Bet. Now, people like this perek a lot in Shir Shel Yom. You know why? Because it's short, right? It's almost as short as Fridays. Almost as short as Fridays. And Fridays is actually more known, what we call Shkura B'Fiv, because we say Hashem Malach Geut Lavesh on Friday night, and it's used in other contexts as well. So we're a little bit more familiar with the text of the Yom Shishi. But here, Yom Shlishi, after Yom Sheni was long and Yom Revi is even longer, so you get to breathe a little bit with as if everybody's looking at their stopwatches at the end of davening. That you're going to save yourself approximately 10 seconds in the saying of Hayom Yom Shlishi b'Shabbat. Let's read the perek first, and then we'll see what the issues are and its relationship to creation of the world of Yom Shlishi. Okay, Mizmor le'Asaf. Let's just say one word about Asaf. Who is Asaf? I'm just opening up the perek of Bereshit Perek Aleph, so we have it before we even get started. Okay, we got it. Yofi. Asaf is one of the Levi'im in the time of David HaMelech. So we already have things in the days of David HaMelech that are anticipating Beit HaMikdash. We said this with regard to Yom Rishon b'Shabbat, the saying of Tilim Kaf Daled, of being the perek that would be sung at the moment that the Aron Brit is being brought into the Beit HaMikdash and into the Kodesh Kodashim, and that triggered the custom that when we bring back the Sefer Torah to the Aron Kodesh, we say that after Yahalu Hashem Hashem, we say Le David Mizmor Hashem Haaretz U'Loah. Fine. So here, Asaf wrote a whole string of chapters of Tehillim that were incorporated into Tehillim, and they begin with Mizmor le'Asaf. Most of them have something to do with, they sound like kinot. They sound like kinot in the elegies of Tisha B'Av, of destruction. And they have a lot to do with giving, musar, to letting it out on people of being degenerate for here and there. And this chapter is actually no different. It talks about the breakdown of the judiciary, terrible judges. And what exactly does this have to do with Yom Shlishi? When I read the Yom Shlishi, people think Yom Shlishi is a great day. It says Kitov twice. So we talked about this in the previous shiur, that Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't finish the section of separating the upper waters and the low waters. That still didn't have direct benefit for mankind. But on the third day, Kadosh Baruch Hu separates in the river itself, the dry land, the Yabasha, the dry land appears and the rivers stay in the places or the oceans where there'll be water. And then comes the second stage of Tachei Aretz Desha, vegetation kicks off. So both of these become very, very important for human existence, and therefore part one receives its kitov as if the complementing work of the Yom Sheni, and then the Tachei Aretz Desha, the vegetation, receives its kitov as well. So but people think, Yom Shlishi has this great omen, so great good luck charm to it. So you have to move on Tuesday, and then when everything falls apart, you question the great thing. Say but we explained that kitov is something that Kadosh Baruch Hu left open, because as we explained last week in describing Yom Sheni, which was just an ode to Yerushalayim and the sanctity of Yerushalayim. So we spoke about the fact that there was a division, Vayavdel. The name of the game of Yom Sheni's creation was some type of separation. And that separation had to do with the fact that in the world of spirituality, there's going to be separation. I quoted the Mishnah in Masechet Kelim, where it talks about 10 gradations of Kedusha, leaving Chutz La'aretz out. because there is no Kedusha there. I explained that to our brethren in Australia last week, and they were very, very happy to hear that they're living in a land of far, far, far from Kedusha. And but Kedusha begins with Eretz Yisrael, but then it gets upgraded as you come to Yerushalayim, and Yerushalayim to Harabayit, and Harabayit to sections of Harabayit where the Mizbeach was, and then close to the doors of the Heichal, and then in the Heichal, and then Kodesh Kodashim. 10 gradations of Kedusha, and it's never ending. It's just never ending. And I pointed out that that's actually the idea of what Kedusha is. You try to strive to go higher and higher, knowing very well that you'll never achieve finality. Right? Mi aleh bahar Hashem. Who can achieve, achieving the end game? There is no end game. Even if you've achieved some plateau, you can slip, and you're constantly striving and striving and striving. And that's why Avraham Avinu, as the Rav explained, was never told exactly where Eretz Yisrael was, but El Haaretz Asher Areka. Keep going, keep going. And so too, the second Lech Lecha of Har HaMoriah, Bari Akeda. El Achan Heharim Asher Omar Elecha. My gosh, what are you supposed to put in ways? You have to have something a little bit more concrete than that. Keep going, because that's what Kedusha is. So that type of separation of Mavdil ben Kodesh L'chol, ben Or L'chosha, ben Yisrael L'amim is constant aspects of involvement in separation when it comes to the world of Kedusha. And now the Yom Shlishi comes and continues with the process of Havdalah, of separation. And that's why the work of Yom Sheni wasn't complete. There was no Kitov there. There's got to be another aspect of separation, and that's going to be the separation of the physical world. While Yom Sheni spoke about the Mayim, which Mayim Elyonim is Ruchni, is spirituality, all different levels of separation within the world of spirituality, the Yom Shlishi is the separation of the material world. So the material world now begins with the separation between water and dry land that can become inhabitable for human existence. Because without that separation, human beings couldn't exist. And without vegetation, human beings couldn't exist. So there are going to be places on planet Earth that will be fertile for agricultural growth, and there are going to be areas that are going to be desert and not going to be relevant for this, and so on. So within the created material world, there is separation between that which is livable and that which is inhabitable, and that which where vegetation will grow, and it's preferred that the population should be focused in these areas. And when you start having human beings competing for better land and better food, you're going to have strife. You're going to have conflict. And when you have conflict, there's going to be need for a judiciary to iron it out. What the purpose of Yom Shlishi's Shir Yom, and it'll be a talk about judiciary, is that the judiciary was there to separate between chaos and proper civil behavior. And that's why it's... So let's see what the parak is. Mizmor le'asaf. Elokim nitzav ba'adat kel, bekerev Elokim yishpot. This is Shem Hashem, Elokim. Kadosh Baruch Hu, we want that human beings should stand before a Kadosh Baruch Hu in justice by having human judges. Elokim nitzav ba'adat kel. Adat kel is going to be a nickname of the judiciary. Risham Shofar Hirsch points out the psukim in Vayikra, where it definitely refers to the Sanhedrin. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be present, Elokim nitzav, where? Ba'adat kel, where Am Yisrael is going to stand and sit in judgment. But even when human beings are sitting in judgment, it's really Bekerev Elokim Yishpot. It's going to be in the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is to say that there is a partnership here between the judicial action of a Kadosh Baruch Hu and human action, where a Kadosh Baruch Hu is interested that human beings carry out the task, but carry out the task in the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu carrying out his, capital H, task. V'kerev elokim mishpat. And now comes the musar. Here comes the hard words. Ad matai tishbetu avel. You look at source number 9. I don't know if it came out on your page on the bottom of the page or what. Yeah, my page is the bottom of the page. From Parshat Kedoshim. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. Don't do injustice. In other words, you, the judges, have an opportunity here to mete out proper and righteous justice. And if you don't, you're doing a travesty, an injustice to the person who's standing on trial. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. Lo tisa pinei dal. Tisa panim is an expression of favoritism to somebody. And here, the idea in Parshat Kedoshim is lo tisa pinei dal. There's a poor person here standing in trial against a rich person. It's the person who lent money. He's the person who's got the money. He's got the power. He's got the clout. And then there's Nebuch. There's this miscain, this person. So, you might think that the judge is going to have a little bit more derech eretz for the rich person. He's going to treat him, even if it's a psychological edge in the Beit Din. And the poor person is going to feel disadvantaged because of his situation. Torah says, don't do that. Lo tisa pinei dal. You have to read into the words. That is, don't look favorably at the other guy when the poor person is standing in front of you in judgment. V'lo tehedar pinei gadol. Don't somehow glorify, the face of the more important person here. B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. It's got to be done b'tzedek. I remember Menachem Begin al Shalom, where there was a situation in his government where somebody was on trial for bad doings. Unfortunately, somebody wore a kippah also. And of course, in the media, the person was slammed completely before it even got to trial. And Begin said that it says, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, right? Parshat Shoftim. Tzedek, Tzedek. So he quoted the Kotzker Rebbe. Begin quoted the Kotzker Rebbe. Why does it say twice Tzedek? Why couldn't it just say B'tzedek Tishpot and that's it? Why Tzedek, Tzedek Tishpot? He says that even Tzedek has to be B'tzedek. That even if you're going to do righteous, it has to be righteously done. And not something that, behind the back of smearing somebody and so on. It was such an insightful, hard, only from a person of the stature, of the moral quality of Menachem Begin to quote the... but here, this pasuk is used by David HaMelech, by Asaf in Tillim. Ad matai tishbetu avel. It says, lo tasu avel b'mishpat. How long are you going to go on with this kind of misbehavior as judges? Upnei rishaim tisu sela. You're raising the face of the rishaim. Because you're giving them the full credit in the court. You're giving them a time and a day where they feel respected and so on, which means that the rishaim are being given to feel that they have a little bit of an advantage here in court. So that's the bad news. The good news is shiftu dal v'yatom. No, you should judge the poverty-stricken and the orphan, the ani varash, those who are downtrodden. Hatztiku. Do justice with them. Get it right. Paltu dal ve'evyon. Palte means to basically save. It's a type of a verb of saving. Save the dal and the evyon. Miyad rishaim hatzilu. Save them from the hands of the wicked. Do something. So, there's a pasuk. I have this in source number 10, I believe. The next page, right? From Tillim, Sur Meira Vasei Tov Bakei Shalom V'Rafeu. So first thing you have to do is get rid of the bad ways, and then you work on getting to the good ways. So Pasuk Gimel is the bad ways, as the good way is the bad. I'm saying so. Pasuk Bet is the bad ways. Ad Matai Tishputu Avel Pnei Rishaim Tisusela. Pasuk Gimel is already, and Dalet are the good ways. Shiftu Dal V'Atom Aniva Rash Hatztiku. Paltu dal ve'evyon, miyad rishaim atzilu. Very poetic. And then he turns back to the judges, the dark side. Lo yad'u v'lo yavinu b'chashecha yitalachu. They don't know and they don't understand, and they're running in the darkness. Yimotu kol mostei aretz. They're going to cause the collapse of all the nation's institutions. Mossad here doesn't mean institutions in a modern sense, but it means the foundations. The foundations. The foundations of the country are going to collapse. So let's look at the Ibn Ezra, who in source number 11 explains this pasuk, where it begins with lo, right? Lo yad'u. So Ibn Ezra says, Divrei ha-mishorer, that means the author, shehochicham, he's dishing out the Musa here, v'lo yadu v'lo hevinu, he's screaming at them, they don't know, they don't understand. Or, he says, ta'amo, we can explain the following, shotku, ki'ilu lo yadu, they do know the truth, but they're silent. And that's even worse. That's even worse, he says. Vitam, and what he says, b'chashecha, what does he mean, b'chashecha yitalachu, they're going in the darkness? Ki hashochad ya'aver einei chachamim pikchim. The Torah says, Ki hashochad ya'aver einei chachamim v'salef devrei tzadikim. And he's just quoting it quickly. He's saying, bribery blinds the eyes of the wise. So you guys are on the take. That's what you're doing. Vitam, and the understanding of the end of the pasuk, Yimotu, ruyim heim mostei aretz yimotu. The foundations of the world are worthy that they should collapse. Bavur ivut hadin, because of the travesty of justice. O lo yachusu hashoftim sheyemotu kol mostei aretz. The judges don't even care. They don't care that the world is going down because of their actions, their judicial actions, their bad, false judicial action. Okay, so we go back to the first page. Pasuk Vav and Pasuk Zayin, Ani Amarti, this is the author Asaf saying, Elokim atem ubnei elyon kulchem, you guys are saying that you're divine? You think you're divine? You think you're bnei elyon, you're children of the above, and you have the right to just play around with the justice here? Achein ke'adam tmutun, you're going to die like all you mortal men. There's nothing divine about you. Uke'achad asarim tipolu, like some of the princes, some of the ministers, they're going to fall. You're going to fall with them as well. Kuma elukim shafta aretz. This is a turn to call to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to rise and judge the world. Ki ata tinchal b'chol hagoyim. You're going to be able to show the entire world, not just OUisrael, the world, that justice will prevail. So, this is a tough calling to judges, I may say, of who he's talking about in the days of David HaMelech and so on. So let's take a look at the sources. So obviously he's talking about corruption. I mean, we know Yeshayahu talked about corruption very much so in Perek Aleph. Talking about the days of David HaMelech. So maybe Asaf is already projecting. He's projecting, some of the coming attractions in the judiciary. Yeah. So source number 2 we saw already a few times from the Gemara Masechet Rosh Hashanah, brought the Braita Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Akiva, that all of the chapters for Shirat HaLevi'im somehow correspond to the days of creation. B'shlishi, on a Tuesday, Hayu Omrim, Elokim Nitzav Ba'adat Kel. Why this chapter? Al Shem Shegila Eretz B'chochmato V'hechin Tevel La'adato. He revealed the land with his wisdom, and he prepared the places of habitation for his flock. I still don't get it. When I just read this in the Gemara, it's an enigma. Why this Yom Shlishi is sung? What does that have to do with Judges? It's almost like focusing just on that first pasuk and saying something about Elokim Nitzav Ba'adat Kel. Okay, but it's not clear. But in source number 3, the Rambam has his own take on understanding, and he says the following: Kvart natnu tam b'gmara Rosh Hashanah. It was already the Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah already gave the reasons. Madua bacharu mizmorim elu leyamim alalu. Why these chapters were chosen for these particular days to be sung in Beit HaMikdash, and why we say them every single day. Ve'amru, and it says, and I just fast forwarded to Tuesday. Ubashlishi shebo nitgalta haaretz. Yes, the land, the dry land was revealed, because that's what happens with the idea of that the waters would recede and the yabasha, the dry land, would appear. Asher ba yiyeh hadin. That's where justice would prevail. Okay, so now already Rambam is connecting the parak with the theme of the parak of the chapter is justice with something that occurred in the creation process on Tuesday. V'hadayanim omrim Elokim nitzav ba'dat kel. And the judges will say this verse that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is here with us as we apply justice. Okay, so it's a long shot yet, what the Rambam is saying, but it most probably has to do with what I said just a few minutes earlier, that day 3 was the day of creation, of separation of chaos to civility. And it would be the judges who would be guaranteed with the task that civil life and order, law and order, should prevail on this dry land that's now being revealed for human habitation. Human beings didn't enter into the picture until Yom Shishi, the last day of creation. But here already, you have already the platform of the dry land that's going to be for the purpose of civil law and order. Similar to Wednesday's creation of the celestial bodies that will give us the concept of measurement of time, and they're going to be used for the years and the Yamim Tovim, Vayula Otot, and so on, the Yamim, Vishanim. Fine, you still don't have human beings on the 4th day, but everything's being put into place so that when human beings arrive on the scene, everything's in order. So here you have what's being put into order is the idea of law and order. And Rambam says, and it'll be Yemei Adin v'Dayanim Omrim Elokim Nitzav B'Dat Kel. So let's point out that this is not OUisrael yet, and in this parak, at the very end, Kuma Elohim Shafta Haaretz Ki Ata Tinchal B'Chol HaGoyim. So let's remember that you have 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach. And there's a discussion in Masechet Sanhedrin if 6 out of the 7 were already given to Adam HaRishon. And the Rambam actually adopts that opinion. The only one that Noach hears about that the others didn't know about was Ever Min HaChai. And that is, you're not allowed to slice off a limb of an animal while the animal is still alive and eat it. Obviously cook it and eat it and so on, but if the animal's still alive, that's a horrible thing. So even the nations of the world, when they were finally given a license to eat meat, and that comes only in the 10th generation of the world, in the days of Noach. Prior to Noach, everybody was vegetarian. But after the Mabul, after the flood, human beings were given a green light. They are allowed to eat meat, provided that the animal is put to death. However it's put to death, it's put to death. Ultimately, and OUisrael learns the laws of Shechita, the way we are supposed to put the animal to death. But the nations of the world are supposed to put the animal to death, and then they're allowed to carve up the animal and eat the meat. Fine. So Ever Min HaChai could not possibly be given to Adam HaRishon, where there was no allowance even to eat meat in the first place. So, but the other 6, against idolatry, against adultery, against murder, against the theft, and one of them is dinim. They're supposed to set up a judiciary. And the Gemara even kicks around some of the Rishonim, the greats of the Middle Ages, who is supposed to conduct the judiciary so that the nations of the world should keep their bargain of the 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach, or rather 6 other mitzvot. Is it Goyim? Are they supposed to set up their own judiciary? Or is it that OUisrael is entrusted with setting up a judiciary to make sure that the nations of the world keep their part of their 7 mitzvot? it seems pretty clear that it's part of the mitzvah of the Goyim, because they were given dinim, and they were given dinim in days of Adam Rishon, and certainly by the days of Noach. There's no OUisrael yet in this. So what you see is that judiciary, keeping law and order, is an integral part of human existence. And that's why the Rambam says that the world already, the concept that there should be law and order kicks in on Yom Shlishi of the created world, where there's now available space on planet Earth where human existence is going to grow and develop, and there's going to be vegetation, and there's going to be competition for food, and competition means ipso facto that there's going to be fights, and there's going to be struggles, and so on. There's going to be a need for a judiciary to keep law and order in this world. Because if you don't have it, you're going to have war, constant war. And do you know that the word milchama in Hebrew, the source, the shoresh is lechem, lamed, chet, mem. Because the basic reason for human strife is for food. And that's why nations sometimes conquer other nations to expand their economic horizons. It's not just for power, but the power also. Take a look in Parai. Parai knew that the minute his food source is depleted, he's through. He knew it. And that's why when Yosef comes on the scene and gives him this great idea of how to store food so that there will be regulated food rations given out to the people, Parai knows he bought himself extra time on the throne. He knows that. Because that is the principal responsibility of government, whether it's an elected government, whether it's a autocratic government, whether they like the government, they don't like the government. That's the most principal responsibility. Make sure that people have food to eat. Because a human being alone, one person alone, may not be able to feed himself because of all kinds of limitations in life. But collectively, the nation can actually feed itself. If you take a look at, I quote 100 times Rabbi Shalom Goldscher al-Bracha is his great word, where he says, if you want to see God, you want to talk to God, go to the Kotel, but if you want to see God, go to Shuk Machne Yehuda, of the implementation of the vision of Yecheskel, Vatem Harei Yisrael, Anpachem Titenu, Ferichem Tis'u Lami Yisrael, Ki Kervu Lavo. I think Shlomo Melech wouldn't recognize what we have today in Eretz Yisrael, the amounts of food that we are able to produce. Forget about that we have the ability to import, but import, that's because we like to fatten ourselves. The basic foods are available here in Eretz Yisrael for everybody, and water for everybody. We're having a little bit of a tough year. You might not think so, because a month ago there was quite a lot of rain here. But okay, it tapered off a little bit, and but the desalination plants are providing drinking water for everybody. So Baruch Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu has been excessively generous to us, and we do have. But this is something that nations used to fight about, and here judiciary warnings were put into place in Beit HaMikdash every single Yom Shlishi when they remembered the Bria of Yom Shlishi. So now I just want to talk about the connection between the judges and a Kadosh Baruch Hu, because that's a major theme in this parak. Okay, Elokim nitzav ba'adat ke'el b'kerev Elokim yishpot. So you look at source number 4. Source number 4 is the Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat, and it's the first chapter of Masechet Shabbat, and there it tells us things that we shouldn't be doing in the late afternoon hours, because time's going to run out. A lot of people like to push things off. Like push off. And then they ended up missing things. And they say, well, I didn't think I'd miss, So it says, don't do the following things before mincha. Mincha here means the time of mincha in the afternoon. Lo yeshev adam lefnei asapar. Don't go to the barber. You know why? Don't go to the barber, right? If you didn't have mincha yet. Why? Because you're going to miss mincha. Why are you going to miss mincha? Not that the barber is going to take. The men's barbers don't take as long as the women's barbers. Right? But even the men's barbers, you know where you spend your time? Waiting. You come to the barber, and there are 4 people behind you, and each guy's going to take 15, 20 minutes, you know. Oh, he needs his hair washed also, you know, and he needs his beard trimmed also. Oh, yeah. And you're looking at the clock, and samuch lemincha, don't do it. Ad palel, make sure that, what was that? Right, so bloodletting also, there the Gemara talks about it actually, because bloodletting makes you weak also, and you can lose time. It's time consuming. So all these things are going to be time consuming. Lo yichnas adam lemerchatz, to the bathhouse. You know, believe me, once upon a time, people didn't have running water at home, right? So there was a bathhouse, and the bathhouse sometimes doubled also as a mikveh, sideshow. It was mikvahs. V'lo lebursiki, that's a tanning of skin of animal skins. V'lo le'echol, don't sit down to eat right before mincha time, because you know you're going to get bogged down in your meal. V'lo ladin, don't sit down in judgment. Don't start a case. If you started, it says ein mafsikim, then don't break up. You know, get it done. So the Gemara actually asks in all these cases, what exactly means the beginning of? What does it mean, the beginning of davening? What does it mean, beginning of davening? You know, everybody's got their idea of what it means, the beginning of davening. But that's not our shir today. What? Aleinu, very good. Aleinu has a nickname, Tfilat HaDerech. You know, it's got 1 foot out of the shoe. But what does it mean, the beginning of sitting down to eat? What does that mean, formally sitting down to eat? What does it mean, sitting down to judgment? So in source number 5, Me'ematai hatchalat adin. What does it mean that the judges have begun so that we can invoke the halakha that if they began, don't break it up? Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Yonah once said, Mishiyit atfu hadayanim, when the dayanim put on their talis. What? What does a talit have to do with judgment? What does a talit have to do with judgment? The answer is, dayanim sat with a talis on, draped in a talis. So why do we put on a talit for davening in the morning? What's so important about talit? You don't say the mitzvah of tzitzis. Person has a talit katan, whether it's under the shirt, or top of the shirt, you know, whether he's got his tzitzis, you know, flying high, you know, or tucked in, which, by the way, there's a machloket, whether the tzitzis should be in or out. So those of us who have the tzitzis in are also okay, and I got news for you, that's the majority opinion, that it should be in. Chassidim had this thing about out, and Israeli kids have everything out. So it's not just the tzitzis, it's the undershirt also, if he's b'chlal wearing one, right? So there's no raya, there's no proof from Israeli kids who've got the tzitzis flying on all sides. Okay, beseda, the idea of, so if you have tzitzis on in the morning, what do you need a talis on for davening? Why? Because a talit is associated with davening. There is a thing called ituf, draped, because of standing before the Shekhinah. Every time the halacha has a moment of standing before the Shekhinah, almost like Eliyahu and Elisha, who would drape themselves when they felt the sensation of God's presence in front of them. It's an act of humility. Like, I can't look. Moshe Rabbeinu at the sneh, tries to close his eyes and drape himself because of awe, A-W-E. So standing before Kadosh Baruch Hu in Shmoneh Esrei demands that we do something physical to drape ourselves. Now, Ma'ariv, there's no tzitzis at nighttime, and that's why there's no talis at nighttime at all. Fine, okay, and it's still Shmoneh Esrei. Mincha, there's a good question, except that because talis and tefillin went together, and because, as those who are learning Daf Yomi now in Menachot talk about tefillin, that there's a reason why we take off our tefillin. Tefillin is a mitzvah from morning to night, except that we take it off in the morning because you have to have focus on a Kadosh Baruch Hu as you're wearing tefillin, and it's just impossible for human beings to go through the day and go without losing sight of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So we don't want to profane the tefillin, so we take it off. So once the tefillin goes, the talis goes also, and that's why mincha goes without a talis as well. But in theory, there should be a draping around for others. But there are two other occasions that we also have, a presence of Shekhinah, and there is a talus, and one is at a Brit, exactly. Well, if you make a Brit at 2 p.m, you'll see the moil's going to put on a talus, the father's going to put on a talus, the sandik's going to put on a talus. What are you putting on a talus for? So some people have said that actually it's a spillover from Shachris. You know, most people used to do a Brit at the 6:30 minyan at 7 in the morning, because then, you know, you give somebody something, a shluck to drink, and they go to work. Where's this business that a Brit you have to go to the catering hall and have 250 invited guests for a whole full-fledged meal? Only in Israel, right? Where, as Levi Eshkol once said, what do you think about having a 5-day work week? So he said, it's a great idea. Let's start working 2 days. We'll work our way up to 3, and we'll eventually get to a 5-day work week, you know? The idea was to cut off the Friday, or not cut off the Friday, right? So the idea that today, you know, if you go to work, you leave at 1 o'clock. I'm going to a Brit. Everybody understands that. Right, so the Gemara says that, right? You learned it in Psachim, right? So the Gemara says in Psachim that is reason makdimim lemitzvot. Vayashkem Avraham baboker. Your first thing in the morning. Right, except that people, but the Gemara there says, allows that if more people are going to be at the Brit later in the day, so that it glorifies the mitzvah. And you know who we learned that out from? Avram Avinu. Because while he was a Vayashkem Avram baboker person, yet the Brit was done be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the middle of the day, because he wanted people to see it. He didn't want to do it, that he was hiding, you know, he was embarrassed. Look what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to do. No, out in the open, let everybody see I'm doing it. So that became a minhag, that if you have more people at a Brit, it becomes a greater expression of Kiddush Hashem at the Brit. So the fact that we have the talit, that's done because there's a presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's another moment of presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is Kiddush Levana. Except that it's nighttime, so that's why there's no talit. But the Rav always explained, you mentioned Aleinu l'shabeach, used in the Siddur. Why is it at the end of the davening? Because it's, to use the Lamdanim of Brisk's jargon, it's a matir. It allows you to leave the presence of Shekhinah. It's properly removing yourself from the presence of the Shekhinah. So during every davening, there's the presence of Shekhinah. You end by gracefully saying Aleinu l'shabeach, and you walk away from the tefillah. So there is Shekhinah by the Brit. How do we end the Brit? Aleinu l'shabeach. We also say Aleinu l'shabeach. And how do we end Kiddush Levana? Aleinu l'shabeach. We do the same. So there's a moment of Shekhinah, and that's how it's the exit strategy of Aleinu l'shabeach. So when the Dayanim sat in judgment, there was a presence of Shekhinah, and that's why they were draped with the talit. And the Gemara says, when does the judgment begin? When do the proceedings begin? When they put their talis on. Mishiatfut hadayanim. So maybe the robes also have something, that's already a goyish thing, but maybe it's a spillover that you should have some type of awe and reverence for the judges. Okay, but here we're talking about for Kadosh Baruch Hu. And if you look in source number 7, we know that in monetary cases, there are 3 dayanim. Source number 6, Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha. There are 3 judges. So how do you know there are 3 judges? So source number 7, the Gemara starts counting the word Elokim, but it's really not Elokim, it's Elohim. It's judges. It's not God. It's judges in the context of judicial action. Shlosha minalan, says the Gemara. How do you know you need 3 judges for monetary cases? The Tanu Rabbanan says in the Braita, and this is a quote from Parshat Mishpatim, V'nikrav ba'al habayit el Elokim, right? Finish the pasuk. Im lo shalach yado b'mlechet re'ehu, right? So you have to be a Baal Kairei, you know. Right? That's what my uncle Rav Shalom in his shul. I was the Baal Kairei for many years, so I know how to learn. So I know the psukim by heart, right? Harei kan echad, that's one Elokim, and there's another pasuk. Ada Elokim yavo dvar shneim. The 2 of them will come to Elokim, which means another Elokim. Harei kan shnayim. It's Elohim. It's Elohim. Asher yashiun Elohim. We've trained ourselves to say Elokim here. You'll see why. Harei kan shlosha. You have 3 dayanim. Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yonatan says, no. The first one, he teaches you that you have to have a judge. Rishon tchila ne'emar. The first time it's not extra. When do you start counting? When you have extra. Time number 1 is not extra. The extra starts from time number 2, and then there's time number 3. Ela ad Elokim yavod v'ashneim is 1 extra. Asher yashuun Elokim is 2 extra. But ain't Beit Din shakul. You can't have an even numbered Beit Din because you have to bring it to a possibility of a split decision. So you need to break the tie. So that's why you need a third judge. Mosifin od echad harei kan shlosha. So anyway, you split the pie here. There are 3 judges, and the psukim in Mishpatim, Parshat Mishpatim, that have God's name as the judge. Why is God's name the judge? So in source number 8, it says in Gemara Sanhedrin, Amar Rabbi Shmuel ban Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Kol dayan shedan din emet lamito, a judge that properly beats out the judgment, Mashre Shechina b'Yisrael, brings God's presence. Shene'emar, here's the pasuk, Elokim nitzav v'adat kel, b'kerev Elokim yishpot. V'chol dayan she'eno dan din emet causes the Shechina to separate itself. And then there's another mimer here in source number 12. Let's go jump to source number 12. Ela lomar kol dayan shedan emet lamito afilu sha'achat. Even just for a moment. Ma'aleh alav hakatuv ki'ilu naseh shutaf lakadosh baruch hu b'maseh bereshit. Became a partner to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the creation process. Because it says by Moshe Rabbeinu, Kesiv hacha in Parshat Yitro, vayamod ha'am al Moshe min haboka mi ad ha'arav. Moshe Rabbeinu was sitting in judgment from morning to night. Uchtiv hatam in Briat Olam, vayerev vayvoka yom echad, morning to night, or night to morning, whatever. It's the concept is that judgment, you are putting a rubber stamp on something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did in the creative process, and we've seen that happened on Yom Shlishi, on Tuesday. And then there's another connection. There was a sefer written in the end of the beginning of the 17th century by one of the Achronim, one of the lates after the medievals. His name was Rabbi Chaim Shur, specifically Avraham Chaim Shur, but was known as Rabbi Chaim Shur. And he wrote a sefer called TORAH Chaim on various Mesichtot in Shas, and one of them was Masechet Sanhedrin. And there he wants to understand, why are the judges called by God's name? Why are they called Elokim? So the truth is, in Breshit bara Elokim, Rashi says, what's the difference between the name of God Elokim, the name of God Yud Kei Vav Kei Shem Havaya? That the first one is Midat Adin, judge, God who metes out justice. So it's like he's the judge. But Shem Havaya is Chesed V'Rachamim, the compassionate name of God. Fine. The Netziv of Aloshin flips it. And he says, why is Elokim means a judge? So the question is, why is the judge have God's name? Why? First question is, why does God have the judge's name? Or why does the judge have God's name? So Rav Chaim Shur says a very interesting answer. He says, the judge has to have smicha from his Rebbe. Who did the Rebbe get smicha from? His Rebbe. His Rebbe. His Rebbe. Smicha takes you back to the first act of smicha of Parshat Pinchas, where it says, Vayismoch yadav alav, Moshe Rabbeinu is giving smicha to Yeshua. Right? Moshe kibel Torah misinai Masara Yeshua. But one second, who did Moshe Rabbeinu get smicha from? When Moshe Rabbeinu was on Har Sinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him smicha. So there's something of Elokim that was given over to Moshe that he now gives over to Yeshua. V'natata mehodcha alav. Some of your glory you're giving over. What glory is he giving over? The concept of Elokim. So every dayan that has smicha, ish mipi ish ad Moshe Rabbeinu, has something of Elokim quality attached to him. And that's why the Dayanim were known as Elokim. The bottom line is that the world stands on justice. In Pirkei Avot we say in source 13, Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, Al Shloshat Dvarim Olam Omeid, the world stands on Din, Emet, and Shalom. And the thing is that while this Mishnah is quoted in this way, the real Girsa was Al Emet Val Hadin Val Shalom. There are, it should be the other way. If you look at the earlier Mishnah at the beginning of Pirkei Avot, it says Al Shloshat Dvarim Holam Omeid. And here it also says Omeid, but the Girsa is actually Kayam. Kayam means exist. What's the difference between Omeid and Kayam? Shloshat Dvarim Olam Omeid. Torah, Avodah, Gemilut, Chasadim. It's not 3 different things. Torah is the top of the triangle, which splits into between man and God, and that's Avodat Hashem, and between man, and that's Gemilut Chasadim. So there's a triangle, Torah, and it splits between Ben Adam LaMakom, Ben Adam LaChavero. So too, the Emet, which it parallels Torah, splits at top of the triangle, it splits into, the Emet carries down to two levels. One is absolute justice, and the other is compromise, and that's Shalom. Gemara says, compromise, Pshara, is Mishpat Sheyesh Bo Shalom. So sometimes you might think a compromise is not the absolute truth, but it's also truth. It's relative truth. And sometimes the world needs absolute truth, and sometimes it needs relative truth. And that's the triangle of Shlosha Dvarim Holam Omeid, Al Emet, Val Adin, Val Shalom. Similar to Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim. And that's why Avraham Avinu called HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the task by Sdom. And he said in source 14, Chalila lecha me'asot davar kaseh lamit tzadikim rasha. You're going to destroy the entire Sdom, but there might be some tzadikim in Sdom. And you can't do this. Vayat tzadik rasha, the tzadik becomes like the rasha. Chalila lech hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. You have to take care of the fact that if there's a tzaddik in Stone, he's going to be rescued. And that's when the negotiation started. All right, let's check it out. Kadosh Baruch Hu agreed to the principle that if there's a tzaddik in Stone, he wasn't going to kill everybody out, but save the tzaddik. These are our messages for Yom Shlishi. So now, when we say our Yom Shlishi b'Shabbat, we should say it a little slower. Okay.